So decluttering can often come with what feels like this overwhelming amount of guilt. And for a lot of people, that keeps them stuck in clutter. Maybe in the past, you've felt courageous and pulled out some boxes from your basement, under your bed, or even your attic and started pulling things out. But the second you put them in your donation bin, your stomach turned into a big knot and you started to question yourself because of the guilt. Now, this feeling is not uncommon, but it's high time you gave yourself permission to overcome it. And it's totally easy for me to stand here on the sidelines with my little baby microphone. Isn't it so cute? I'm only using it because my other one's broken, but anyway, right? It's easy for me to stand here on the sidelines and be like, if you don't use it, let it go, because apparently that's how I sound. But it's so much more complex than that, isn't it? Especially when the driving force is guilt. And often it's really about making different perspective shifts along the way on our simplifying journey that are really going to make the difference in you being able to let go of something versus you getting stuck in that guilt and hanging on to it for far too long. So I want to know, are you holding on to any items strictly out of guilt? Maybe you don't use them, you don't even really want them or need them, but the guilt's causing you to hang on. Let me know in the comments. So let's talk about all the different ways that the guilt gets layered, because it actually becomes quite complex. It's not just necessarily that you consider yourself a sentimental person. That can be a part of it, but there are a lot more avenues. So number one is gift giving, or maybe you have been the gift receiver. You've inherited something, your partner gave you an anniversary gift, your kids made you a special art project, anything, any type of gift that was given to you can feel really challenging to let go of sometimes. And let's talk about those inherited items for a minute. Sometimes that's furniture, jewelry, a set of dishes, no matter what it is. Sometimes it's the guilt of even considering letting go of those because you know someone in your family wants you to keep them. In other words, like you're going to feel judged if you decide to donate or sell those or pass them along to someone who will use them because someone in your family might be upset by it. There's also the guilt about the environmental aspect of decluttering. And then, of course, a really common one is the guilt for the monetary aspect, right? I paid $50 for this, or maybe it was gifted to you and you tie the guilt back into what they paid for it. Well, I should keep this because she or he spent $50 on this for me, so I'm just going to keep it. So as you can see, what did I list out there? Like 5 different ways that guilt can literally get layered and keep us stuck. So this reminds me of a story because I was recently talking to a friend a few weeks ago, and her mother had recently gifted my friend a set of her grandmother's dishes, and my friend was trying to decide like what to do with it. Well, very quickly she got to an answer, and we were kind of joking because on the phone she said, "Do I need to keep these dishes to like prove that I loved my grandmother?" And of course it kind of made me chuckle a little bit, but I think we've all kind of felt this when it comes to items we receive or were inherited, or just, you know, sometimes we accidentally end up with this stuff because simply we're the closest family member, or maybe it was like an intentional gift from someone who's no longer in our life. And we tend to think like, in order to show or prove that I love them, or maybe even be reminded by them, I need to keep on to this thing, even if I don't truly want it or even need it. And this is where she was able to make her decision. Instead of letting that potential guilt really run that story in her head and run that narrative, she chose a different story, a different path. She said, I can still love my grandma without keeping these dishes. And she kept going on. And she said, in fact, I never once saw my grandma use these dishes. In fact, maybe these were even clutter to my grandma, and maybe she never used them. Maybe she impulse shopped them from Kmart. And I think sometimes we build up these stories like in our head about even whoever we received it utilized this item. And so that's the value in this massive perspective shift, is we have to change the stories we are telling ourselves. Maybe it's a story someone told you. Maybe it's something you just accidentally picked up throughout your lifetime, but we make these up. And sometimes there is a tiny bit of truth to them, but oftentimes there is zilch, nada, goose egg, nothing. To rewrite those, you need to be able to identify what stories are coming up when you are touching those necklaces or going through that jewelry or going through those sets of dishes. What's coming up for you in your mind and heart? Is it, I'm a bad granddaughter or a bad sister if I donate this scarf? My sister really thought I would love this scarf, but I never really wear it, and I feel bad letting it go. But listen, if you gifted an item to someone someone, would you expect them to keep it forever? Oftentimes people don't realize this when it comes to gift giving, is the gift giver is the one that receives like the biggest emotional benefit. And that transaction, literally me giving something to you, is over after that gift giving happens. And so you as the receiver, now it's your decision on what to do with it. It's not the gift giver's decision. In fact, if you know they might want it back, offer it back to them. So once you've identified those narratives and you really need help moving past the guilt, here are some really practical ways to do that. I already mentioned this, so rewriting the story is probably one of the most important things. So if you are noticing a lot of shame or judgment or fear or anxiety in what's happening in your head, sometimes we can combat those with just offering ourselves grace, compassion, and more like logic and practicality. Yes, I would love to maybe hang on to some of this jewelry from my grandma, but I simply don't have the space. And even if I kept all of it, I know it would stay in this box collecting dust, and that's no way to honor her memory. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out 5 of my favorite pieces that I think I could wear, that I think I could repurpose, or maybe I could give them to my daughter when she's a little older, or pass them along to a family friend, right? You get the idea. There's so many other ways that we can hang on to the stuff without hanging on to the memory. Maybe it's taking a picture of it. I mean, there's a million and one ways, but oftentimes bringing in more logic and kind of untying some of that emotion can be really, really helpful here. And number 2 is to move past the fear of judgment. So many of us are highly critical of ourselves, and maybe we expect to be judged by family or friends by letting go of some things. But here's the thing, we don't need to share with them like, hey, I donated that scarf you gifted me 5 years ago. Or hey, I went through grandma's stuff the other day and decided to keep what I really, really love and donate the rest. We don't need to share that, but sometimes it's that also our inner critic and that judge from within that we just need to put at bay and say, listen, I'm confident I'm making the right decision here, and I'm going to keep moving forward. It doesn't make me a bad person to do this. Another really important way to help cope with guilt when it comes to letting go of things is to give it directly to another person. Now, a lot of people, when it comes to decluttering, one of their first stops for getting it out of their home is to drop it off at Goodwill. And I think Goodwill serves a time and a place for everyone. It's convenient. There are a lot of benefits to it, and also a lot of maybe not so benefits to it. We'll have to do a video on that. But I think there is something to be said about seeing the person who these types of items are actually going to bless, and the excitement on their face when you pass along that jewelry or that piece of furniture or that expensive blouse you bought that you just never wore, but your friend is so excited to wear it. And honestly, I think it gives us more of like that dopamine rush, a bigger one than even buying that thing in the first place. So consider doing a little research and finding people in your community. You can also use your local Buy Nothing group. You can find those on Facebooks. They are all over the world in tens of thousands of cities. It's Buy, B-U-Y, Nothing group. I've mentioned them many times, and I've met amazing people who live in my community. There's nothing sweeter than being able to pay it directly to someone else. And another thing is to be able to embrace the sting. I get it. It doesn't feel good to let go of something that cost money that you didn't wear, or maybe you did wear it for a long time and it served a purpose for a few years, but you don't anymore. But you're hung up on that monetary guilt. I get it. It doesn't feel good, but there is something to be said about embracing the sting. And one important thing you can do here is to consider putting boundaries in place to reduce this position in the future. So one boundary could be, I'm going to wait 24 to 48 hours before I buy something. If something costs over X dollar amount, I'm going to talk to my partner about purchasing it first, right? Anytime we can pause and slow down the shopping process, which by the way is lightning speed now, thanks to technology and our natural impulses, we are literally being trained as massive consumers on a day-to-day basis with the amount of ads we see. We are so quick to jump to, I need this and I want this, therefore I'm going to buy it right now. So if that sounds like you, putting boundaries in place to slow down, pause, rethink, and be a little more intentional with your purchases is going to be really helpful here. Okay, so if you've watched my videos, you've maybe heard me say this really one powerful question I recommend everyone ask when it comes to guilt. That question is this: if I were free from guilt, would I still keep this? And if your answer is no, then give yourself permission to let go of those unhelpful narratives. But giving yourself permission is easier said than done, because the hesitance to give ourselves this permission is often deeply rooted in self-doubt. And we tend to allow these outside factors, maybe it's thoughts of feeling judged or fear of judging yourself, right? That harsh inner critic. It's those that tend to hold us back from making these decisions and moving forward and just having clarity with the situation. But I think at the end of the day, all we're really waiting for is that green light, right? That permission to just get started or do what we need to do. And though we may look for that green light from other people, I think it's more important to get to it at its source, which is within ourselves, and just to listen to our gut. And remember, while you may feel that pang of guilt when you get started and just feel that burden on your shoulders, I just want to remind you that you will feel so much lighter once you discover the freedom you have from all of that type of clutter.